The road less traveled. Memory lane murder content warning. The following story contains descriptions of violence, psychological trauma, and sensitive content that may be disturbing to some viewers. This content is only suitable for viewers 18 years and older. Legal disclaimer. All names, specific locations, and identifying information have been altered to protect the identities of those involved. While based on investigative processes, certain details have been modified for narrative purposes and to protect ongoing investigations. This presentation is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Introduction. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The kind of call that makes your stomach drop and your mind race before you even pick up. I've been a detective for 23 years, but I never get used to that sound, the shrill ring in the darkness that only brings bad news. "Detective Shernan," I answered, my voice still rough with sleep. "We need you at Miller's Ridge, mile marker 37. Captain Reynolds' voice was tight, controlled. That's how I knew it was bad. The worse the scene, the calmer he sounds. "What are we looking at?" I asked, already reaching for my clothes in the dark. "A vehicle. Recent model, burned beyond recognition with 2 bodies inside, and something else. You need to see it for yourself." I've specialized in unsolved cases for the past decade, the ones that haunt other detectives, the ones that seem impossible. They call me when the trail goes cold, when the evidence contradicts itself, when something just doesn't add up. But this was different. This wasn't cold. This was still smoldering. 40 minutes later, my headlights cut through the pre-dawn fog as I navigated the sharp curves of Miller's Ridge. The road was notorioso winding stretch carved into the mountainside with sheer drops on one side and solid rock face on the other. Locals called it Deadline Drive for a reason. Even in daylight, its blind corners had claimed too many lives. As I approached mile marker 37, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles pierced through the fog like warning beacons. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of burned rubber, melted plastic, and something far worse, the unmistakable odor of burned flesh that no detective ever forgets. What I saw that morning would launch one of the most perplexing investigations of my career, a case that would challenge everything I thought I knew about human nature, about technology, and about the lengths someone would go to orchestrate the perfect crime. I didn't know it yet, but I was staring at a crime scene meticulously designed to tell one story while hiding another entirely. The deeper I would dig, the more I would discover that nothing about this accident was accidental at all. This is the case that still keeps me up at night. This is the case that changed everything. The investigation begins. The scene was chaotic, yet organized, the controlled chaos of first responders doing their jobs. Fire crews were still cooling the smoking remains of what once had been a luxury SUV. The vehicle had apparently gone through the guardrail and tumbled partway down the cliff before catching on a rocky outcrop about 30 feet down. Then it had burst into flames. "Morning, Shernan." Medical examiner Dr. Eliza Monroe nodded at me, her face grim in the harsh portable lights. Not much to work with here. I surveyed the wreckage as I pulled on gloves. Victims, 2. Driver and passenger, both severely burned. Gender differentiation is possible, but identification will require dental records and DNA. She pointed toward the vehicle with her pen. "Male in driver's seat, female passenger. Accident?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. They wouldn't have called me for a straightforward crash. Captain Reynolds approached, coffee in hand. That's where it gets interesting. Fire crews reported something off about the burn pattern, and there's this. He led me to a portable table where evidence was being cataloged, a partially melted smartphone in an evidence bag. Beside it, a small metal object. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "That," Reynolds said, pointing to the metal object, "is a GPS tracking device, professional grade. It was attached to the undercarriage of the vehicle. The fire didn't reach it." I felt that familiar tingle at the base of my skull, the one that tells me I'm looking at something that doesn't fit, So someone was tracking them. That's not all, Monroe added. Preliminary examination suggests the victims were dead before the fire. How can you tell in this condition? No soot in the airways from what I can see, but I'll confirm in the lab. I nodded, my mind already assembling and discarding theories. Any ID on the vehicle? Registered to a Martin Blackwood, 45, investment banker from Lakeview Heights, Reynolds said, reading from his notes. Married to Serena Blackwood, 42. They have a daughter in college. We're trying to contact her now. Martin and Serena Blackwood, I repeated, committing the names to memory. Any reason someone would want to track them? Any reason someone would want them dead? Reynolds shrugged. That's why you're here. I approached the wreckage carefully. The smell was overwhelming, but I've learned to push past it to focus on what matters. The vehicle had been a Range Rover, late model, expensive. The kind of car that should have multiple safety features to prevent it from going off a cliff. Was the guardrail damaged before impact? I asked, examining the section where the vehicle had broken through. A state trooper nearby answered, "No, sir. Fresh damage, consistent with this incident." I peered over the edge at the wreckage below. Something about the angle bothered me. Were there skid marks on the road? Any indication they tried to stop? None, the trooper replied. It's like they drove straight through deliberately. That didn't sit right. If they were dead before the fire, as Monroe suggested, they weren't driving anywhere deliberately. Someone else was. I turned back to Reynolds. I need the traffic camera footage from this road and any connecting roads. I need the Blackwoods' phone records, financial records, everything. And I need to know who had reason to want them dead. Reynolds nodded, already pulling out his phone to make the calls. As dawn broke over the ridge, casting long shadows across the crash site, I knew this was just the beginning. 2 lives had ended here, but the story of why was just starting to unfold. The Blackwood family. The Blackwood residence sat on a hill overlooking Lakeview Heights, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion with manicured grounds and a circular driveway where a fountain bubbled cheerfully, oblivious to the tragedy that had befallen its owners. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breezy, an ugly intrusion in this picture of suburban affluence. No signs of forced entry, Officer Ramirez reported as she escorted me through the front door. Alarm was set when the first officers arrived. They gained entry after notification of the incident. The interior was immaculate gleaming hardwood floors, tasteful artwork, furniture that looked expensive but not ostentatious. Nothing seemed out of place, no signs of a struggle or hasty departure. When was the alarm set? I asked, scanning the entrance hall. Ramirez checked her notes. 8:47 p.m. yesterday evening. I nodded, making a mental note. The crash had been discovered around 2:30 a.m. by a truck driver. The timeline was starting to take shape. The daughter's on her way, Ramirez added. Olivia Blackwood, 20, sophomore at Eastern State University, about 2 hours away. She's been informed of her parents' deaths. I've done hundreds of next-of-kin interviews in my career. They never get easier. Let me know when she arrives. I want to speak with her personally. As I moved through the house, I was struck by the sense of lives interrupted. In the kitchen, 2 wine glasses sat in the sink. A laptop was open on the island counter, the screen dark. Mail was sorted into neat piles on side table bills, magazines, personal correspondence. Martin Blackwood's home office is this way, Ramirez said, leading me down a hallway. The office was a wood-paneled room with a large desk facing floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the backyard and pool. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with business texts and biographies of successful entrepreneurs. I sat at the desk and began going through drawers, careful to wear gloves. Tax documents, investment reports, property deeds meticulously organized. In the bottom drawer, I found a lockbox. It opened with a key from the desk keychain. Inside, a registered handgun unloaded, passport, birth certificate, and several USB drives labeled with dates going back 5 years. Have tech analyze these, I said, handing the drives to Ramirez. On the desk, a framed family photo showed the Blackwoods on a ski trip, Martin, Serena, and a young woman I assumed was Olivia, all smiling broadly against a backdrop of snowy mountains. They looked happy, the perfect family. But I've been a detective long enough to know that perfect surfaces often hide imperfect realities. I continued through the house to Serena's study, a bright room decorated in creams and blues, with a desk holding a desktop computer, a printer, and a stack of what appeared to be real estate listings. Mrs. Blackwood was a real estate agent, Ramirez explained, specialized in luxury properties. I nodded, scanning the listings. All million-dollar-plus homes in exclusive neighborhoods. High-end clients meant high-end commissions and potentially high-end enemies. The master bedroom was last. King-sized bed made with precision. His and hers walk-in closets. A bathroom bigger than my first apartment. Everything in its place, except one thing. On Serena's nightstand, partially hidden under a magazine, was a small notebook. I carefully picked it up and flipped through it. Most pages contained what looked like appointment notes, shopping lists, and reminders. But on the last written page, in hurried handwriting, MK8, 30 Overlook Point alone. The entry was dated the previous day. Who is MK? I wondered aloud. Unknown, Ramirez replied. No MK. In her phone contacts that we found so far, I took a photo of the page with my phone, and Overlook Point, it's a scenic spot about 5 miles from the crash site, popular for sunset views. Isolated. The pieces were starting to connect, but they formed a picture with gaping holes. Why would Serena Blackwood meet someone at an isolated spot? And if she went alone, as her note indicated, why was Martin with her when they died? And more importantly, who was trailing them with a GPS tracker? My thoughts were interrupted by Ramirez's radio crackling to life. Olivia Blackwood has arrived, sir. I closed the notebook and placed it into an evidence bag. Let's go meet the daughter. The daughter's story. Olivia Blackwood sat in the living room, her eyes red and puffy, hands clutching a tissue that had been shredded by nervous fingers. She was tall and slender like her mother, with her father's dark hair and strong jawline. Despite her grief, she carried herself with a composure that seemed beyond her 20 years. Miss Blackwood, I said gently, taking a seat across from her. I'm Detective Shernan. First, let me say how sorry I am for your loss. She nodded stiffly, eyes focused somewhere over my shoulder. Thank you, the officer said. They said it was a car accident? I chose my words carefully. We're still investigating exactly what happened. That's why I'd like to ask you some questions, if you feel up to it. I want to help, she said, her voice stronger than I expected. I want to understand what happened. I've interviewed thousands of people over my career, grieving relatives, hardened criminals, reluctant witnesses. I've learned to read the subtle signs that someone is holding back, that they know more than they're saying. Olivia Blackwood showed none of those signs. Her grief seemed genuine, her confusion real. When did you last speak with your parents? I began. Yesterday afternoon, around 4. Mom called to check in, like she does every day. Olivia's voice caught on the correction. We talked about my midterms. She sounded normal, happy. Did she mention any plans for the evening? Perhaps meeting someone? Olivia shook her head. No. Just that she and Dad were staying in. They'd been traveling a lot for his work. They wanted a quiet night at home. That contradicted the note about meeting MK at Overlook Point. Interesting. What about your father? When did you last speak with him? Sunday night. He called to tell me he'd transferred money into my account for textbooks. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. He always took care of things like that. I leaned forward slightly. Olivia, I have to ask, did your parents have any enemies that you know of? Anyone who might wish them harm? She looked startled by the question. Enemies? No. Everyone loved them. Dad's clients respected him, and Mom was friends with everyone. She paused. Why would you ask that? It was an accident, wasn't it? I sidestepped the question. We're exploring all possibilities. What about their marriage? Any tensions you were aware of? They were happy, she said firmly. 23 years married next month. They were planning a trip to Hawaii to celebrate. Dad was surprising Mom with it. Her face crumpled slightly. He showed me the reservations last time I was home. I made a note to check on those reservations. And your father's business, did he ever mention any problems? Difficult clients, threats, unusual stress? Olivia thought for a moment. He was working more than usual the past few months. Some big new client he couldn't talk about confidentiality agreements and all that. But he seemed excited about it, not stressed. A client he couldn't talk about even to family? That raised a flag. Dad handled investments for some pretty high-profile people. He was always discreet. I switched directions. Do you know anyone with the initials MK? Who might have been connected to either of your parents? She thought for a moment. No, I don't think so. Maybe a client? Why? Just following up on all details, I said smoothly. One more question. Where were you last night between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m.? If she was offended by the implication, she didn't show it. In my dorm room, studying with my roommate Julie until about midnight. Then I went to sleep. She was there the whole time. She met my eyes directly. You can check. We will, as a matter of routine, I assured her. Is there anyone you can stay with for the next few days? You shouldn't be alone. My Aunt Me Mom's sister is on her way from Chicago. I handed her my card. Call me anytime if you think of anything else, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. As I stood to leave, Olivia called after me. Detective? You still haven't told me why you're asking about enemies. My parents died in a car accident on a dangerous road. Tragic, but not something else, right? I looked at this young woman who had lost everything in one night, who was standing on the precipice of a truth she wasn't ready to face. Sometimes, kindness means holding back. We're just being thorough, I said. Try to get some rest. Outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. Olivia Blackwood believed her parents had died in a tragic accident. She believed they had a perfect marriage and no enemies. She believed her father was excited about a confidential new client. But 23 years of detective work has taught me one thing. What people believe is often far from the truth. And someone had gone to great lengths to make sure Martin and Serena Blackwood never made it home from Overlook Point. Digital footprints. The modern investigation relies as much on digital forensics as it does on physical evidence. People leave digital footprints everywhere they go in their emails, text messages, phone records, credit card transactions, and surveillance footage. Often, these digital breadcrumbs tell a story the victims never intended to share. 2 days after discovering the Blackwoods' bodies, I sat in the digital forensics lab as tech specialist Jasmine Wong walked me through their electronic lives. Starting with the basics, Wong said, typing rapidly on her keyboard. The Blackwoods' cell phone records show both phones were active until approximately 10:17 p.m. on the night of their deaths. After that, no calls, no texts, no data usage. That gives us a potential time of death window, I noted. What about their last communications? Wong pulled up a chart on her monitor. Serena's last call was to a restaurant Bianchi Sat 7, 12 p.m. Reservation for 2 at 9, 0 p.m. They never showed up, so they had dinner plans, I mused. Contradicts their daughter's understanding they were staying in, and contradicts Serena's note about meeting MK at Overlook Point at 8:30. Maybe the dinner was a cover? Wong suggested. Or maybe plans changed multiple times. What about Martin's phone? His last call was at 7:45 p.m. to a burner phone. Call lasted 3 minutes, 12 seconds. That got my attention. A burner? Can we trace it? Wong shook her head. Purchased with cash at a convenience store in Highland Park 2 weeks ago. No surveillance footage preserved. What about text messages? Martin's phone was too damaged in the fire, but we recovered texts from Serena's phone through her cloud backup. Wong pulled up the messages. Most were ordinary exchanges with friends about lunch plans, texts with Olivia about school, reminders about appointments. But one thread stood out: messages with a contact listed only as MK. My pulse quickened. That's our mystery person from her notebook. The messages were cryptic. MK, we need to meet. It's urgent. Serena, I told you it's too risky. MK, not as risky as ignoring this. Overlook point 8:30 tonight. Come alone. Serena, fine, but this is the last time. The final exchange had occurred at 6:23 p.m. on the night of the deaths. Can we trace this number? I asked. Already did, Wong replied. Another burner, different from the one that called Martin. This one was activated 3 weeks ago, used exclusively to communicate with Serena, then went dark right after that text exchange. I leaned back, processing this information. So both Blackwoods were in contact with burner phones the night they died, but Serena was supposed to meet MK alone. Why was Martin with her? Maybe he found out? Wong suggested. The GPS tracker on their Carrot wasn't police grade, but it was high-end. We pulled the data from it. It was activated 2 weeks before the deaths and tracked the Range Rover's movements continuously. Who was monitoring it? The tracker transmitted to an app. We've subpoenaed the records from the manufacturer, but these things can be purchased with fake credentials. I rubbed my temples, feeling the case expanding in complexity. What about their computers? The USB drives from Martin's desk? Wong pulled up another screen. Martin's laptop and the USB drives contained financial records, mostly legitimate investment portfolios, client information, market analyses. But she clicked on a folder. We found this hidden directory. It contains records of offshore accounts and what appears to be a parallel investment structure operating alongside his legitimate business. I leaned forward to look at the figures. The amounts were staggering. Money laundering? Possibly. The transactions are structured to avoid detection, moving money from seemingly legitimate businesses through a series of shell companies, then into these offshore accounts. Wong pointed to a recurring name on the transactions. This entity keeps appearing Monarch Kinetics. I felt a jolt of recognition. MK Monarch Kinetics. Our mystery texter? Very likely. And there's more. Serena's computer shows she was researching countries with no extradition treaties with the U.S. She'd also been looking into purchasing property in Montenegro under an LLC. The picture was becoming clearer, but still fragmented. So Martin was potentially laundering money through his investment firm for this Monarch Kinetics. Serena was planning an escape route. They had dinner reservations they never kept. Instead, they went to meet someone at Overlook Point and somehow ended up dead in their burning car at the bottom of a cliff miles away. Wong nodded. That's what the digital evidence suggests. What about surveillance footage? Anything from traffic cameras near Overlook Point or the crash site? Limited coverage in that area, Wong said, pulling up a map with camera locations marked. We have the Blackwoods Range Rover passing this intersection at 8:17 p.m., heading toward Overlook Point. Then this camera near the base of Miller's Ridge shows them at 9:43 p.m., heading up toward where they eventually crashed. That's a big gap, I noted. Over an hour and a half unaccounted for. What happened at that meeting? There's one more thing, Wong said, her expression grave. We found this on a cloud backup of Martin's phone. She played an audiophilia voicemail from an unidentified male voice received 3 days before the deaths. You think you can steal from us? You think you can just walk away? We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? You have 3 days to return what you took, or you'll regret it. Your wife will regret it. Your daughter will regret it. The threat was explicit. The deadline would have expired the night they died. Have voice analysis running on this, I said, my mind racing, and dig deeper into Monarch Kinetics. I want to know what they do, who runs them, and why they were paying Martin Blackwood millions of dollars. As I left the lab, the case had transformed from a suspicious accident to something far more sinister: a calculated double murder with roots in financial crime, possible blackmail, and corporate intrigue. But one question loomed larger than the rest. If the Blackwoods were fleeing, planning to disappear to a country with no extradition treaty, what had they stolen that was worth killing them for? The breaking point mid-story climax. The investigation had been progressing steadily for 2 weeks. We had established that Martin Blackwood had indeed been laundering money for Monarch Kinetics, a shell company that, on paper, developed proprietary trading algorithms but showed no evidence of actual product development. We'd traced millions flowing through Martin's elaborate financial maze, eventually ending up in accounts controlled by a shadow group of investors. Sherina Blackwood, we discovered, had been planning their escape for months, researching new identities, offshore banking, and secure properties in countries beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. She'd liquidated her personal investment portfolio gradually to avoid raising flags, the perfect accomplice to her husband's scheme. The GPS tracker had been placed by a private investigator working for Monarch Kinetics, a former police officer named Ray Dalton, who refused to cooperate, citing client confidentiality. We were working on a warrant to compel his testimony. But on that morning, exactly 15 days after finding the Blackwoods' charred bodies, everything I thought I knew about the case shattered like glass. I was reviewing phone records in my office when Dr. Monroe called. "Shernan, you need to come to the lab. Now." Her voice had the kind of controlled urgency that makes my skin prickle. 30 minutes later, I stood in the sterile environment of the medical examiner's lab, staring at DNA test results that changed everything. "Run it by me again," I said, struggling to process what I was seeing. Monroe pointed to the report. We finally got comprehensive DNA results back on both victims. The male is confirmed as Martin Blackwood through comparison with hair samples from his hairbrush, but the female victim... She paused, letting the impact of her next words land fully. "The female is not Sherina Blackwood." I felt like the floor had tilted beneath me. Not Sherina? Then who? DNA doesn't match any samples from the Blackwood residence. No match in CODIS either. She's unidentified. My mind raced, reconstructing the case with this explosive new information. If that's not Sherina in the car, then where is she? "There's more," Monroe said, leading me to another workstation where enlarged photos were displayed. These are microscopic examinations of the victim's lung tissue. Neither victim has soot in their airways, confirming they were dead before the fire. But both show traces of the same paralytic agent succinylcholine. It's used in surgical procedures, breaks down quickly in the body, nearly impossible to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. Which you were, I noted. After seeing no signs of trauma or struggle, I had to consider alternative causes of death. This drug would have paralyzed them within moments, stopped their breathing within minutes. Virtually undetectable in routine toxicology. A medical professional would have access to this, I said, thinking aloud. Or someone with connections to medical supply, Monroe agreed. It's tightly controlled but not impossible to obtain. I stared at the photos, the implications cascading through my mind. So someone, possibly Sherina, killed Martin, and this unknown woman staged the crash and disappeared. That's one possibility, Monroe said carefully. Or, I continued, someone killed Martin, and this woman, whom they might have believed was Sherina and the real Sherina, is also a victim we haven't found yet. Also possible. I pulled out my phone. I need to speak with Olivia Blackwood again. And we need to issue an alert for Sherina Blackwood missing and possibly in danger, or missing and possibly dangerous. As I left the lab, my certainties had evaporated. The case I thought I was solving, a double murder tied to financial crime, had twisted into something else entirely. Who was the woman in the car with Martin? Why would someone want to make us believe it was Sherina? And most importantly, where was Sherina Blackwood now? Just when I thought I had found the thread that would unravel this mystery, the entire fabric had changed pattern and texture in my hands. If the truth was what I was now suspecting, this case was far darker and more complex than anyone had imagined. The impersonator. The revelation that the female victim wasn't Serena Blackwood sent shockwaves through the investigation. Overnight, we pivoted from searching for a killer to searching for Serena herself, who was now either a victim of foul play or the prime suspect in a meticulously planned double homicide. I asked Olivia Blackwood to return for more questioning, unsure of how to tell a grieving daughter that her mother was either missing or a murderer. When she arrived at the station, I noticed she looked even more strained than during our first meeting. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she'd lost weight. "Miss Blackwood," I began gently after she'd settled in the interview room. "Thank you for coming in. I know this is difficult. You said you had an update?" Her voice was tense, hopeful. She still believed both her parents had died in that car. I took a deep breath. "Olivia, I have some news that's going to be shocking. The DNA results from the crash victims confirmed your father's identity, but the woman in the car was not your mother." I watched as confusion, disbelief, then a fragile hope crossed her face in rapid succession. "Not my mother? Then, is she alive?" Olivia's voice cracked. "We don't know yet. We're doing everything we can to locate her." Olivia pressed her hands against her mouth. "I don't understand. If that wasn't Mom in the car, who was it? And where is my mother?" "That's what we're trying to determine," I said. "Which is why I need to ask you some more questions. Has your mother been acting differently in recent months? Any changes in behavior, routine, relationships?" Olivia seemed to struggle with the question. "She's been, I don't know, more distant maybe? We used to talk every day, but lately it's been more like every few days. She said she was busy with work. When did this change begin? Maybe 3 months ago?" Olivia thought for a moment. "Around the time Dad started working with that confidential client." I made a note. The timeline aligned with when the money laundering for Monarch Kinetics began ramping up. "Did your mother ever mention anyone threatening her or your father, or express fear for her safety?" Olivia shook her head. "No, nothing like that." "What about physical changes? Did your mother change her appearance recently? New hairstyle, significant weight loss or gain, anything like that?" "She started coloring her hair more regularly to cover the gray, and she lost some weight, maybe 10 pounds. She said it was from stress at work." I showed her a photograph. "This was taken from a traffic camera the day your parents disappeared." "Is this your mother in the passenger seat?" Olivia studied the grainy image and frowned. "It looks like her, but something seems off. The way she's sitting, maybe?" "I can't put my finger on it." "One more difficult question, Olivia. Is it possible your mother could have been having a relationship outside her marriage?" Her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Absolutely not. My parents loved each other. They were planning their anniversary trip. Mom would never." She trailed off, her certainty seemingly wavering. "What is it?" I pressed gently. "It's probably nothing," she said. "Mom's been getting more texts lately." When I asked who they were from, she'd just say work and change the subject. I thought maybe she was planning a surprise for Dad. After Olivia left, I met with my team to reassess the case. "We need to identify the woman in the car," I told them. "Run her DNA against missing persons databases. Check recent missing person reports for women matching Serena Blackwood's general description: early 40s, 5'7", approximately 130 pounds, blonde hair." Detective Rivera, who'd been assisting on the case, spoke up. "I've been digging into Monarch Kinetics. It's a shell within shells, but I managed to trace it back to a holding company owned by Victor Crane. The name hit like a thunderbolt. Victor Crane, a hedge fund manager with rumored ties to organized crime. He'd been investigated multiple times, but never indicted. Too smart, too connected, too insulated by layers of lawyers and corporate structures." "Monarch Kinetics," I said slowly. MK, not just the company initials, but also Victor Crane's initials reversed, Rivera finished, hiding in plain sight. So Martin Blackwood was laundering money for Victor Crane. I paced the room, piecing it together. Then something went wrong. Martin stole from him or threatened to expose him. Crane threatens the family. And then Martin and a woman who isn't Serena end up dead in a burning car, Rivera said, while the real Serena vanishes. Get me everything on Crane, I ordered. Known associates, properties, recent travel. And check if he has any connections to medical facilities or personnel who might have access to succinylcholine. As the team dispersed, I returned to my office and stared at the caseboard. Photos of Martin, the crash site, the unknown woman's autopsy, and Serena's driver's license photo stared back at me. In the center, I'd just added a photo of Victor Crane, distinguished-looking, silver-haired, with the confident smile of a man accustomed to power. Something nagged at me about the traffic camera photo of Serena in the Range Rover. I pulled it up again on my computer and zoomed in as far as the resolution would allow. The woman had Serena's hairstyle, similar facial structure, but as Olivia had said, something was off. I pulled up photos of Serena from social media and compared them. The difference was subtle, but present the way she held herself, the angle of her head. This wasn't just Serena looking different that day. This was someone doing an excellent impersonation of Serena. An impersonator who ended up dead beside Martin Blackwood. The case had taken yet another twist, and I felt the first stirrings of a theory that would explain it, a theory so audacious, so calculated, that it both disturbed and impressed me. But I needed proof. And I needed to find Serena Blackwood, whether victim or mastermind, before anyone else died. The hidden connection. The investigation accelerated as we pursued dual tracks, identifying the mystery woman in the car and locating Serena Blackwood. 3 days after revealing our findings to Olivia, we had breakthroughs on both fronts. The woman in the car was Vanessa Klein, 41, Detective Rivera announced, placing a photo on the conference table. Reported missing by her employer when she didn't show up for work the day after the crash. I studied the photo. Vanessa had the same general build as Serena, similar blonde hair, similar features. With the right styling, makeup, and clothing, she could pass for Serena Blackwood in low-resolution traffic camera footage, or to someone who didn't know Serena well. Background? I asked. Worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for Medicor Industries for the past 8 years. Divorced, no children. Lived alone in an apartment in Westridge. The pharmaceutical connection immediately caught my attention. Medicor, would she have had access to succinylcholine? Not directly, Rivera replied, but she'd have knowledge of medical supplies, contacts in hospitals and clinics. We're checking her phone records now to see if she had any connection to either of the Blackwoods. What about Victor Crane? Any connection there? Rivera hesitated. That's where it gets interesting. Medicor Industries is owned by a conglomerate called Pinnacle Health. Guess who sits on Pinnacle's board of directors? Crane, I said, the pieces clicking into place. Not just that, Rivera continued. Vanessa Klein's personnel file shows she was promoted to regional manager 3 months Agorite when the Blackwoods' behavior started changing. The promotion came with a substantial raise and was approved directly by the executive board, bypassing normal channels. So Crane places someone in his organization close to the Blackwoods, I mused. But why? And what was her role? My phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from tech specialist Wong. Trace Serena's credit card, used yesterday at hotel in Portland. Surveillance confirms it's her. I felt a surge of adrenaline. We've located Serena Blackwood. She's in Portland. Within an hour, local Portland PD had been dispatched to the hotel, but Serena had already checked out. However, they confirmed from security footage that it was definitely hair alive and apparently unharmed. She's running, I said to Reynolds as we updated the case board. But is she running from Crane or from us? Maybe both, Reynolds suggested. The next breakthrough came from Vanessa Klein's apartment. Forensics had found a hidden laptop containing encrypted files. Wong had managed to crack them. Vanessa Klein was working directly for Victor Crane, Wong announced, displaying the contents on the conference room screen. These are reports she sent him, detailed surveillance of the Blackwoods going back almost a year. Routines, habits, relationships, finances. She was studying them. Studying them for what purpose? I asked. Based on these communications, it appears she was preparing to impersonate Serena Blackwood. There are notes on Serena's mannerisms, speech patterns, even handwriting samples. I remembered the feeling that something was off about the woman in the traffic camera photo. So Vanessa Klein was pretending to be Serena in public, while the real Serena was. Where? There's more, Wong said. We found a series of text messages between Klein and another unidentified number, discussing what they call Operation Butterfly. The texts suggest a plan to extract someone from a dangerous situation and then disappear them. Butterfly, I repeated. Monarch kinetics. Butterflies. Monarch sit can't be coincidence. Reynolds leaned forward. Are you suggesting Crane was helping Serena escape from something? Or someone, I said, the pieces finally arranging themselves into a coherent picture. Martin Blackwood. I walked to the caseboard and began rearranging the evidence photos. What if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if Martin wasn't the victim? He was the threat. The room fell silent as I continued. What if Serena discovered what Martin was doing, laundering money for Crane, and somehow got evidence against both of them? Evidence she could use as leverage. Crane, realizing she had him cornered, makes her an offer help her escape from Martin in exchange for her silence. So Crane turns on Martin to protect himself from Serena's evidence, Rivera said slowly. Exactly. Crane provides Serena with a body double Vanessa Klein to establish her public presence, while the real Serena prepares to disappear. Meanwhile, Martin is becoming increasingly volatile, hence the threatening voicemail we found. But the threat wasn't from Crane to Martin. It was from Martin to Crane. Reynolds finished, understanding dawning on his face. The plan was probably for Vanessa to keep playing Serena publicly until Serena was safely away. But something went wrong. Martin discovered the deception, forced Vanessa to take him to meet with whoever was helping her, likely Crane himself, at Overlook Point. And Crane eliminated both problems at once, Rivera said. Killed Martin and Vanessa, staged it to look like an accident involving Martin and Serena, giving the real Serena a perfect cover for her disappearance. Everyone would think she died in the crash. Except we found out the body wasn't hers, I said. Now Serena's on the run. Crane knows we're onto the scheme, and somewhere there's evidence that could bring down Crane's entire operation. And potentially implicate Serena in a conspiracy, Reynolds added. Find me that evidence, I told the team, and find me Serena Blackwood before Crane does. As they dispersed, I stared at the photos on the board. Martin Blackwood, money launderer and possibly abusive husband. Vanessa Klein, paid impersonator who got in too deep. Victor Crane, criminal financier who eliminated problems with surgical precision. And Serena Blackwood, victim turned conspirator, now hunted by both law enforcement and a killer. What had started as an apparent car accident had unraveled into a complex web of deception, greed, and desperation. But the most dangerous threads of that web were still hidden from view, waiting to ensnare anyone who came too close to the truth. The butterfly effect. The search for Serena Blackwood intensified as we raced against Victor Crane's resources to find her first. Portland PD had missed her by hours, but their surveillance footage showed her looking nervously over her shoulder before checking out of the hotel. She knew she was being hunted. We tracked her movement north to Seattle, where she ditched her credit cards and disappeared from electronic surveillance. But she'd made one critical mistake: a phone call to her sister in Chicago, lasting less than a minute. Not long enough to trace in real time, but long enough for us to get a court order for the sister's phone records. She called from a payphone at a gas station off I-5, Wong reported. Local police checked the security footage. She bought a bus ticket heading east. She's running inland, away from major cities, I noted. Smart move if you're trying to disappear. Meanwhile, we'd been building our case against Victor Crane. Financial forensics had traced the money flowing through Martin Blackwood's investment firm back to Crane's network of shell companies. We'd established Vanessa Klein's connection to Crane through her employment. We had the threatening voicemail, which voice analysis confirmed was Martin Blackwood, not someone threatening him as we'd initially assumed. What we didn't have was direct evidence connecting Crane to the murders. We needed the leverage Serena had supposedly gathered the evidence she was using to ensure Crane's cooperation in her escape. I decided to approach the case from a different angle. Let's go back to the Blackwood house, I told Rivera. Serena was planning this escape for months. She must have kept that evidence somewhere. The Blackwood mansion had been processed thoroughly, but we hadn't been looking specifically for hidden evidence. Now, with a clearer understanding of the case, we might see what we'd missed before. The house was exactly as we'd left it weeks ago, still sealed as a crime scene. Olivia Blackwood had been staying with her aunt and hadn't requested access to the property. If you were hiding evidence against a dangerous criminal, I said to Rivera as we entered, where would you keep it? Somewhere secure but accessible, she replied. Somewhere not obvious, but where you could get to it quickly if needed. We started with Serena's study, examining the bookshelves, floorboards, air vents, the classic hiding spots. Nothing. In the master bedroom, we checked behind paintings, under the mattress, inside hollowed-out books. Still nothing. We're thinking too conventionally, I said, frustrated. Serena was smart. She knew if Martin or Crane suspected she had evidence, these are the first places they'd look. I tried to put myself in her position, a woman planning to escape a dangerous situation, needing to secure evidence that would keep her safe even after she disappeared. What about Olivia? I suddenly asked. The daughter? What about her? Serena called her every day, even as she was planning to disappear. That connection was important to her. I pulled out my phone and called Olivia Blackwood. When she answered, I asked, Olivia, did your mother give you anything unusual in the months before she disappeared? A gift? A keepsake? Something to keep safe for her? There was a long pause. Not exactly, but she did ask me to keep her old jewelry box in my dorm room. Said it had sentimental value and she didn't want it getting lost during some renovations they were planning. When did she give it to you? About 2 months ago, Olivia. We need to see that jewelry box. Immediately. 3 hours later, Olivia arrived at the station with an ornate wooden box. It looked antique, with intricate carving and a small brass lock. Mom gave me the key separately, Olivia said, handing it over. She said the box contained family heirlooms and to keep it safe. With Olivia's permission, I unlocked the box. Inside, as expected, were various pieces of jewelry necklaces, earrings, brooches, nothing that immediately stood out as evidence. May I asked, carefully removing the jewelry layer by layer. At the bottom of the box was a velvet lining. I pressed around the edges and felt a slight give in one corner. Carefully, I peeled back the lining to reveal a hidden compartment underneath. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note that simply said, "Insurance. What is it?" Olivia asked, peering at the discovery. "Potentially. It's the reason your mother is still alive," I said, "and it might be the only thing keeping her that way." In the tech lab, Wong plugged in the USB drive. It contained encrypted files that took her nearly an hour to crack. When she finally accessed the contents, what we found was devastating. Financial records detailing Crane's entire criminal enterprise. Recordings of meetings between Crane, Martin Blackwood, and other associates discussing money laundering operations. Photos of Crane meeting with known organized crime figures. And most damning of all, a video file. The video showed Crane and Martin Blackwood in what appeared to be a hotel room, arguing heatedly about money. The argument escalated until Crane struck Blackwood across the face. Then Crane turned to the camera, apparently hidden, and said with chilling calmness, "If this recording ever sees daylight, I'll destroy everything you love before I kill you." "He's threatening Serena," I said, watching the video for a third time. This must have been when she realized how dangerous he truly was, and when she decided she needed to escape from both of them, Rivera added. With this evidence, we could arrest Crane for his financial crimes, but still lack direct proof of his involvement in the murders. However, the video gave us probable cause for search warrants of all his properties. The most promising location was a cabin in the mountains Crane owned through one of his shell companies. Remote, isolated, the perfect place to conduct business, away from prying eyes. As we prepared the tactical team for the raid, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Detective Shernan," I answered cautiously. "I know you're looking for me." A woman's voice, tense but controlled. "Mrs. Blackwood? I don't have much time." "He's found me. I'm in Montana, near the line crackled with interference. Listen carefully. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Vanessa wasn't supposed to die. No one was supposed to die. Tell me where you are, Serena. We can protect you. The evidence in my jewelry box, did you find it?" "Yes." "It's enough to put Crane away for his financial crimes, but we need your testimony to connect him to the murders." "It wasn't just about escaping Martin," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It was about exposing what they were really funding. The money laundering. It wasn't just for tax evasion or organized crime. They were funding the call cut off abruptly. I tried calling back, no answer. I immediately contacted the Montana State Police, but with only the vague information that she was somewhere in the state, there was little they could do. The cabin raid is our best shot now," Reynolds said. "If Crane's operation is as extensive as the evidence suggests, he might have taken Serena there." As the tactical team geared up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Serena had been trying to tell me something crucial, something beyond the financial crimes and the murders. What were Crane and Martin Blackwood really funding that made it worth killing for? Worth creating an elaborate scheme with body doubles and fake deaths? Whatever it was, I knew we were running out of time to find Serena Blackwood alive. The butterfly effect of her actions had set in motion consequences none of us could have predicted, and the final chapter of this twisted story was about to be written either with justice or with more bloodshed. The final revelation. The morning of the raid dawned clear and cold. Tactical teams surrounded Crane's mountain cabin while surveillance drones monitored the property from above. No movement had been detected for hours, but 2 vehicles were parked outside a black SUV registered to Crane's company and a rental car traced to one of his known associates. I watched from the command post as the teams moved into position. This was the culmination of weeks of investigation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we found inside would change everything. The raid itself was anticlimactic. No resistance, no gunfire, no dramatic standoff. Just the controlled chaos of tactical officers clearing rooms and securing the premises with military precision. Then, over the radio, Detective Shernan, "You need to see this." Inside the cabin, the scene told a story of hasty departure. Papers scattered across a desk, a half-empty glass of scotch, a laptop left open and running, but it was what they found in the basement that chilled me to the bone. A makeshift medical room with an examination table, monitoring equipment, and pharmaceutical supplies. In the corner, a chair with restraints. And on the walls, photos and document surveillance of the Blackwoods going back years, not months as we had believed. This wasn't a recent operation. It had been in the planning stages for a very long time. No sign of Crane or Serena Blackwood, the tactical commander reported. But based on these coffee cups and food containers, someone was here within the last 12 hours. I examined the laptop, careful not to disturb potential evidence. The screen showed a map with a blinking dot moving along a mountain road about 30 miles north. "He's tracking someone," I said, pointing to the screen. "That could be Serena." I called for helicopter support, and requested state troopers to set up roadblocks along all possible routes from that location. If Crane was moving Sherina, we had a chance to intercept them. Meanwhile, forensics began processing the cabin. In a hidden safe behind a painting, criminals and their cliches never cease to amaze me. They found a hard drive containing what appeared to be research files. Wong began analyzing the data on site. "This is disturbing," she said after several minutes. "These are research protocols for experimental treatments using recombinant DNA technology, gene editing, way beyond what's currently approved by any regulatory body." Is this what Sherina meant about what they were really funding? I wondered aloud. "Look at this," Wong said, pointing to a section of financial records. "Monarch Kinetics wasn't just a shell for money laundering. It's an actual research company operating off the books, outside any oversight. They've been recruiting scientists from mainstream pharmaceutical companies, paying them enormous sums to work on something called Project Rebirth. Human experimentation?" I asked, the implications turning my stomach. "Based on these protocols, yes. And according to these records, they've already begun trials." The pieces suddenly aligned in my mind with terrible clarity. The medical room in the basement. The pharmaceutical connection through Vanessa Klein. Martin Blackwood's investment firm channeling money not just to hide it from taxation, but to fund illegal research with human subjects. "That's why Sherina ran," I said. She discovered what they were really doing. My phone rang the helicopter team. "Detective, we've spotted 2 vehicles on a fire road about 20 miles north of your position. One appears to have crashed into a ravine. The other is stopped nearby. Any signs of movement?" I asked, already moving toward the exit. "Negative." "Wait, we have a single individual moving away from the vehicles on foot, heading into the forest. Keep eyes on that person. We're on our way." The helicopter picked me up from a clearing near the cabin, along with Rivera and 2 tactical officers. As we flew toward the coordinates, I could see the winding mountain roads below treacherous in the best conditions, deadly in the hands of desperate people. From the air, the crash site came into view. A silver sedan had gone over the edge of the fire road, rolling partway down a steep embankment before being stopped by trees. About 50 yards away, a black SUV was parked haphazardly, its doors open. There, Rivera pointed to movement among the Teresa figure in dark clothing, moving with determination away from the crash. "Can you put us down ahead of them?" I asked the pilot. "There's a clearing about a quarter mile ahead in the direction they're moving." "It'll be tight, but I can do it." Minutes later, we were on the ground, moving through the dense forest to intercept the fleeing figure. The tactical officers spread out to flank our quarry while Rivera and I moved directly toward the target. Then I saw her, Sherina Blackwood, alive but injured, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, limping but moving with desperate purpose. "Sherina," I called out. She whirled, her eyes wild with fear until she recognized me. "Detective Shernan?" I approached slowly, hands visible. "It's over, Sherina. We know everything. About Crane, about the research, about Vanessa Klein. We found your evidence." She sagged against a tree, relief momentarily overtaking her terror. "Crane, he's back there, in the SUV. I think he's dead." Rivera moved past us with the tactical officers to secure the crash sites while I stayed with Sherina. "What happened?" "He found me in Montana," she said, her voice shaking. "Brought me back here to make me disappear for real this time. They were going to use me for their trials." She shuddered. "When we were driving, I managed to grab the wheel. We went off the road. I crawled out. Thought he was unconscious. But he followed you in the other vehicle," I finished. She nodded. "He was injured too, but still coming. Up on the road, he pulled a gun. I charged him. We struggled. The gun went off. She looked down at her blood-stained hands. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to escape." "Let's get you medical attention," I said, helping her to a fallen log where she could sit. "Then you need to tell me everything. About Project Rebirth, about what Martin was involved in. All of it. As we waited for the medical team, Sherina Blackwood finally told the full story, one far more twisted than I had imagined. Martin Blackwood hadn't just been laundering money for Crane. He'd been an enthusiastic investor in Crane's true enterprise illegal genetic research aimed at curing aging and extending human life. The research involved experimental treatments that had already killed several test subjects, all people who had been lured with promises of revolutionary medical care for terminal conditions. Martin believed in it completely, Sherina explained. He thought they were going to change humanity, make a fortune, go down in history. He didn't care about the people who died in the trials. Called them necessary sacrifices. When Sherina discovered what was happening, she'd confronted Martin, who had become violent. That's when she began gathering evidence and planning her escape. Crane, realizing she knew too much, had offered to help her disappear, not out of kindness, but to control the situation. The plan was for Vanessa to gradually replace me in public while I prepared our new identities. Then I'd die in an accident, and Vanessa would resume her normal life. Nobody would look for me, and I'd have insurance against Crane ever coming after me. But Martin discovered the plan, I said. Yes. He found messages between me and Vanessa, confronted her, thinking she was me. When he realized the deception, he forced her to take him to Overlook Point to meet with Crane. Sherina's eyes filled with tears. I was supposed to be there too, but I got delayed. By the time I arrived, they were already gone. Crane later told me he had no choice but to eliminate them both when Martin threatened to expose everything. Rivera returned from the crash sites. Crane's dead, she confirmed. Gunshot wound to the chest, consistent with Mrs. Blackwood's account. We found another set of remains in the SUV trunk. More remains, I asked, alarmed. Badly decomposed. Been there a while. We'll need DNA testing, but it's Vanessa, Sherina said with certainty. The real Vanessa Klein. The woman who died with Martin wasn't Vanessa at all. She was another double, someone Crane hired to impersonate his impersonator. The layers of deception were dizzying. So Crane double-crossed you, I said. He never intended for you to escape. Sherina nodded miserably. He needed me to believe I was getting away so I wouldn't release the evidence. Meanwhile, he was grooming another woman to play Vanessa playing me. Once Martin was eliminated and everyone thought I was dead, Crane planned to use me in his experiments. My disappearance would be perfect. No one would look for someone they believed was already dead. As medical personnel arrived to treat Sherina, I stepped away to process what we'd uncovered. A scheme of such complexity and malice, it was almost admirable in its calculated precision. Multiple body doubles, elaborate deceptions, all to protect an illegal research operation that had already claimed numerous lives. In the end, greed and the quest for immortality had led only to death. Martin Blackwood, the fake Vanessa, the real Vanessa, Victor Crane, and countless unnamed victims of their experimental treatments. Sherina Blackwood would face charges for her role in the conspiracy, but given the circumstances and her cooperation, I suspected she would eventually rebuild some semblance of a life with her daughter. As for the evidence she'd gathered, it led to the dismantling of Crane's entire network and the discovery of a hidden research facility where more volunteers were being prepared for trials. Lives were saved because one woman had been brave enough or desperate enough to fight back against monsters masquerading as visionaries. Epilogue: Detective's Reflection. 6 months later, the courtroom was nearly empty as Judge Harriman delivered Sherina Blackwood's sentence: 5 years probation, 0 hours of community service, and cooperation in ongoing prosecutions against Crane's network of doctors and scientists. Given the circumstances and her crucial testimony that had saved lives, the DA had agreed to a plea deal that acknowledged her role as both conspirator and victim. I watched as Olivia embraced her mother, both women crying with relief. Their relationship had been strained by the revelations of Martin's true nature, but they were healing together, rebuilding from the wreckage of deception that had nearly destroyed them both. Outside the courthouse, As autumn leaves swirled around the steps, Serena approached me. "Detective Shernan," she said, extending her hand. "I wanted to thank you for seeing the truth when no one else could." I shook her hand. "The truth was well hidden, Mrs. Blackwood. You played a dangerous game." "A desperate one," she corrected softly. "When you have no good choices, sometimes you make terrible ones just to survive." I nodded, understanding more than she knew. In my years as a detective, I'd seen how ordinary people could be driven to extraordinary acts both heroic and horrific when pushed beyond their limits. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Start over." "Somewhere quiet. Olivia will finish college, and then maybe we'll travel. See the world together." She looked toward her daughter, who was waiting by a car. "I've learned that time is precious, and that running from your problems only means they're chasing you." As I watched them drive away, I reflected on the twisted path this case had taken from an apparent accident to a double homicide, from financial crime to illegal human experimentation, from a missing woman to multiple body doubles and an elaborate conspiracy. The Blackwood case changed how I view human nature. It showed me the lengths people will go to for wealth, for power, for more time on this earth. But it also showed me the strength that can emerge when someone is fighting not just for their survival, but for their soul. In my 23 years as a detective, I've learned that the most dangerous criminals aren't always those with guns or knives. Sometimes, they're the ones with credentials and connections, the ones who believe their intelligence places them above moral constraints, above law, above humanity itself. Victor Crane and Martin Blackwood believed they were reaching for immortality. Instead, they created a legacy of pain and death that will long outlive them. As for me, I still wake sometimes in the dark of night, thinking about those mountain roads and the crash that wasn't really a crash, about how easily the truth can be obscured when someone is clever enough, determined enough to bury it. And I wonder, how many other cases have I investigated over the years where I found only the truth someone wanted me to find? How many perfect crimes have gone undetected because the person who committed them understood that the best deception isn't hiding the evidence, it's creating evidence that tells a compelling but false story? In the end, that's why I do this work. Not just to bring closure to victims and their families, but to search for the truth that lies beneath appearances, beneath assumptions, beneath the stories we tell ourselves about what happened and why. Because in my experience, the truth is rarely simple, rarely clean, and rarely what we expect it to be. But it's always, always worth finding. Moral lesson. What I've learned from this case, and what I hope you take away from it, is that appearances can be devastatingly deceptive. We all construct narratives about the people in our lives based on what we see, what we're told, what we want to believe. But beneath those narratives can lie completely different realities. Martin Blackwood appeared to be a successful businessman and loving husband. Victor Crane presented himself as a respected financier and philanthropist. Their victims saw them as saviors offering revolutionary medical treatments. Even Serena, in her desperation, created false narratives that ultimately endangered more lives. I ask you to consider, when was the last time you truly questioned your assumptions about someone close to you? When did you last look beyond the story you've been told or the story you've been telling yourself to seek the deeper truth? The most dangerous deceptions aren't those imposed on us by others, but those we willingly accept because they align with what we want to believe. The greatest protection against becoming a victim is not suspicion, but awareness, the courage to see people and situations as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. If you find yourself in a situation that doesn't feel right, trust that instinct. Ask questions. Seek verification. Remember that predators count on our willingness to accept convenient explanations and our reluctance to appear suspicious or paranoid. And if you've been moved by this story, share it with those you care about. Not to frighten them, but to arm them with awareness. Subscribe to the Shernan YouTube channel for more investigations into cases that illuminate the darker corners of human nature, not for sensationalism, but for the lessons they can teach us all. Because in the end, the truth may not always set us free, but it can certainly keep us safer than comforting lies ever will. This has been Detective Shernan. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the twisting paths of the Blackwood case. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and remember the most important evidence is often hiding in plain sight.